this, forgive me, because this is not going to take into consideration any intangible, right? But when I'm evaluating a quarterback, I'm going to look at how does he do with the schematics of the game? Does he understand the game? Does he have the arm talent? What is his arm talent? How does he do manipulating the game from the pocket? Can he control the game from the pocket? Can he create outside of it? And then is he a threat with his legs? So basically 5 categories on the field. And you can argue there's more, but those are really the 5, and everything can kind of fit within that. Caleb's the only guy, I've been doing this now for a little over 10 years, evaluating for the draft, and he's the only quarterback that I've evaluated that is elite in all 5 of the categories. And that's why for 2 years we've been talking about him as the number 1 quarterback prospect. And that's why, regardless of how he played this last season with, I would say, an inferior team around him, I still have him as that number 1 guy. Yeah. So every quarterback has to have a superpower, at least to be at this point in the draft, right? Considered for the number 1 pick. And his superpower, his best trait, is his ability to not just be effective, but really hurt the defense when he's creating. Not when he's running, but when he's creating. His ability to throw with accuracy, power, leverage, touch. He can drive the ball all on the run off of his platform. It's almost like as a defensive coordinator, okay, he's in the pocket, we're okay, okay. Now when he's outside of the pocket, just hold your breath, because that's when he's really going to hurt the defense.
Hey, Michigan, Joel, off topic a little bit, but the Nick Saban effect and the chaotic coaching changes, as you observed that week, how unexpected was all the movement just by one guy retiring?
Well, that's a big domino, right? And every year, the coaching circuit in college football is a bit of a domino process, and you wonder which is the biggest one to fall, and then that's going to make a lot of other ones fall. And when I was actually on the golf course that day, and I got a text from, I have a guy that works with me, his name is Steve, and Steve texted me, and he was like, Saban retired, and I just texted back, I was like, haha, that's funny, like, I'm busy today. And he's like, no, seriously. And I was like, oh no, and I just drove off the course, because I knew this is going to create ripple effects all over college football. And it did. I immediately thought of kind of the 3 names that I felt like they would target. Steve Sarkisian was on that list, Kalen DeBoer was on that list, and Dan Lanning was on that list. And I firmly believed from that moment, I wasn't even in my car, and I thought one of those 3 guys is going to be the next Alabama head coach. But then what that does is obviously the ripple effects, down from that.
So how many Michigan players do you think you drafted this year?
I think there's an outside chance for, I would say 17 is the number. Here's what I wonder. Are we going to see Jim Harbaugh load up on 7th round picks through trades just to get the record, right? Like, is that a possibility? Obviously being a little bit facetious there, but I do think that there's 17 guys that legitimately have a chance. I would say those late rounds, 6th and 7th round in particular, and the 5th round, you're going to see a lot of Wolverines taken. They were so deep. All of their, quote, role players, draftable players.
Hey, Joel, with Jaden Daniels, how well does his game translate to the NFL?
Well, I think that what you've seen over the course of the last 5 or 6 years is that style translates incredibly well. Football has always trickled up schematically because lower levels have to be creative because they have talent disparities, wide talent disparities as it relates to their competition. And they try to make up for areas of their own roster that might not be adequate. So they have to innovate in order to move the football and be effective on offense. And so football trickles up. And what you're seeing now is the trickle up effect of years of incredible athletes and the best athlete on your team being the quarterback. 25 years ago, the best athlete on the 9-year-old team was the running back, and you handed him the ball every play. Now, the best athlete is always the quarterback, and that's gone to high school, and that's obviously translated to the college game as well, and that's starting to translate to the NFL. We see what Lamar Jackson has been able to do, and Kyler Murray has been able to do, and Josh Allen has been able to do, and Patrick Mahomes, and how he creates outside of the pocket. Now what Caleb is going to do. So Jaden is in a perfect window of opportunity where his game translates and fits as well as anybody's. We don't have to project. We don't have to wonder what his game is going to be like. We can look, watch the NFL game, and think to ourselves, this guy's going to fit right away.
We've seen JJ play as much as anybody. What stands out to him? He has so much tools, but there's still the unknown of how well it translates to the NFL. What's a good fit for him?
Well, two different questions. So the fit, I would say, any of these quarterbacks, I would really want to go to Minnesota. They have more weapons, and you get to play indoors, which obviously today is interesting. And then on the field, his ability to create first downs, that was remarkable last year. When you put on his tape, it can candidly watch a little boring because of the philosophy of what Michigan was able to do. They're just so dominant up front. And then you go in and you filter it out and you watch a cut up of like just 3rd and 6+ or 7+, and all of a sudden it just jumps off the tape. You're like, wow, this guy is incredibly effective in those situations, and he's confident, and those things are going to serve him well at the next level.
What are your comparables? Being in as far as they went to the NFC. How are you?
I'm good.
They went to the NFC Championship game. They've done.
I'm sorry. Repeat the beginning.
What kind of position do you see Brad Holmes being in? They've been to the NFC Championship game. They've done a lot in free agency. It's a little bit of a luxury, certainly. They have some defensive needs. What do you see
Lions.
him doing?
There's a player based on last year's draft that I'm looking at, in particular in the place where they're drafting, and I'm like, oh man, Cooper Sheen looks really good for the Lions. They've obviously scouted Iowa incredibly well, but all kidding aside, he really fits a lot of what they need in the secondary, defensive help more specifically, and a guy that can be a hybrid player. Cooper has played corner, and he's played it as well as anybody in college football. He was remarkable, great instincts. I think he can probably be a better safety in the NFL. Not a lot of people have talked about that, but I think that his longevity would be to move into a more of a safety role. That's a guy that I can't get out of my head when Detroit is looking at this draft.
When you look at the defensive line, certainly that this team moves, there are a lot of guys that have fallen in. Robinson is one of them. We talked to him. He feels like a guy who's a great pick. He said he loves the Lions organization. Do you see them moving up to try to get their guy?
Possibly. This is what I love about the draft, and I feel like it's gotten more aggressive in recent years as all the movement and the trades. What you start to see is that teams go through this process, and they've put an enormous amount of manpower and resources and time and energy into these prospects, and they start to fall in love with not just the player but the person, and they think to themselves, we need that guy in our locker room. And I think that's the reason why you see more trades now, is because teams have the equity, if you want to call it that, the ammunition to go and trade and move up. Robinson's an interesting thought. I keep thinking about maybe even interior for them. I think interior could be in play. I don't think Byron Murphy would be available, but Braden Fisk, Jerzon or Johnny Newton from Illinois, those are names that I could see popping up as well. And Darius Robinson is obviously a really good player as well.
So we have had maybe more inside access to Michigan than anyone over the last 3 or 4 years.
I know.
What stands out to you is maybe the secret sauce to their success, and from what you saw these last couple weeks with Jerome, about that potential continuing?
Okay, so you can't win at that level without really good players. So that's number one. They've had very good players. Now, they've gone about accumulating those players in a very different way than others. They've developed them, whereas others have just recruited them. And I don't want to disparage their recruiting, because they still are in the top 15 usually in recruiting. Now, what you see, generally speaking, is that prior to Michigan's win this year, you had to be a top 5 recruiting team to win a national championship on a 4-year rolling basis. They were outside of the top 10 in terms of their average recruiting rank in the last 4 or 5 years. So that's a bit of a change. So you have to look at, well, like, how did they do this? Well, they built a team that is kind of the antithesis of modern football. Everyone wants to spread out. Everyone wants to get more athletic. Everyone wants to throw the ball more and score as many points as possible. And Michigan decided to go the exact opposite direction. Not that it's boring or anything along those lines, but they wanted to be tougher than everybody they played. They wanted to be more physical than everybody they played. They wanted to have a better culture than everybody they played, and they wanted to be more unselfish than everybody that they played. And they achieved every one of those goals. It's pretty remarkable. I'll say this. I've been around this sport my entire life. My dad was a high school football coach. I've been going to his practices and been around teams since I was 2-3 years old. So in 38 years now, I'm 42, 38, 39 years, that was the most unique team I have ever been around in my entire career. They were completely unselfish, they were totally unfazed, and they were so specifically focused, more so than any other team that I've been around. So I don't know if there's a secret sauce outside of they had a group of men that came together for a common cause that was bigger than themselves, and they did it to a degree that I've never seen before.
Joel,
You too.
who are your comparables for great player? What do you see in him
Yeah.
that have him, in the top 5?
I'm a big fan of Drake. He has, a little bit like C.J. Stroud, been kind of the one everyone wants to knock down this year. And there's always going to be a quarterback that people want to knock down. I don't quite understand it, to be honest. To me, his comp is kind of a combination of a Justin Herbert, Josh Allen. He's big. He's athletic. He makes throws that nobody else in the draft can make except for Caleb. So his ceiling for me is incredibly high. I think he got himself in trouble because he's ultra competitive. He had a team that wasn't great around him. Similar to Josh Allen, right? With the drops that he had when he was at Wyoming. And I think that Drake, he's the youngest of four, he's ultra competitive, and he was going to do anything in his power to go out there and win. He didn't care about his completion percentage. He didn't care if he threw an interception here or there. He was going to force the issue. That's not every player in college football, by the way. I know a lot of guys that go out there and protect their own stat line, protect their completion percentage, protect their touchdown to interception ratio. That wasn't him. And because of that, he's gotten knocked. But if you go and you really watch his top end plays, they project as a top 5-6 quarterback in the National Football League. There's no doubt in my mind. Now, whether that's going to happen or not, I'm not sure. I think that it can, based on where he might go, and I will say I think that the situation that's going to be the hardest to succeed for a young quarterback is New England early in their career, because they just don't have. It's like Justin going to Chicago a few years ago. There's just nothing there to succeed. Bryce Young in Carolina. So if I was one of these guys, New England would be a tougher spot to go succeed early. And I would hope that the organization knew that and the fan base knew that and gave whatever quarterback that was, time to kind of grow.